Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are starting the Transportation and Circulation Committee, June 24th, 2021. This is Kathleen Rodriguez. Let's have the roll call.
Committee Member Blackerby.
Here.
Committee Member Horn.
Here.
Committee Member Cullum.
Here.
And Committee Member Andres Melavos.
Here.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Here.
Thank you. Oh, and Sanford, Eve Sanford. Absent. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone's accounted for. All right, Susan is having a little difficulty with her screen, so we'll bear with her. And Mr. McCollum, are you available to be seen?
I'm working on it, but not presently.
Okay, well, as long as we can all hear each other, I think we can get started. We do have the option for public comment. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, none heard.
No committee member and Chair Rodriguez, no changes to tonight's agenda.
Okay, is there any public comment that's being requested for up to 2 minutes on any subject within our jurisdiction that's not scheduled? Would our IT person know that? Caitlin?
Yeah, I see one attendee and they don't appear to have a hand raised at this time, so I don't believe we have any public comment.
All right, perhaps at a later moment in the meeting. I'd like to move to approval of the minutes from the April 22nd meeting.
I move approval.
So motion by Hillary and a second.
Second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, I think I heard all ayes. All right,
I'm
good.
sorry, I have to take a roll call vote.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay, for approval of the minutes. Committee Member Blackerby.
Aye.
Horn.
Aye.
Cullum.
Aye.
Melavos.
Aye.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, now we are going to move into the main part of our meeting this afternoon, which is to review the Chapala Street Vision Zero Safety and Paving Project. Are all members able to see the documents? Hillary?
Yes.
Andre?
I am, yes.
Susan?
What was the question? I missed it.
Are you able to see the documents?
Nope.
Hmm.
I'm trying. It's just not working.
Well, I wanted to ascertain where we are. And Mr. Cullum, are you able to see the screen?
Looks like he's muted. He's also showing up as an attendee rather than as staff.
So Mr. Cullum may not be connected properly. How should we proceed when we can't have everyone be able to see what you're talking about? Bit of a problem.
Just describe
I guess
stuff.
we'll work on that on the back end, but all committee members or folks joining us on this meeting tonight should be able to view the screen. if you could all review or see the Chapala Street Vision Zero Safety and Paving Project as the slide. Okay, great. And then
My understanding is we have 2 members who are not able to see these slides. That's why I'm saying, what do we do next? We have 3 committee members that can look at the slides right now.
Oh.
So Jessica, what would you recommend?
I have a different screen view than the rest because I'm the one sharing the screen. Can I have confirmation from Miss Mimolsky or Derek Bailey that can you see the slides?
I can see the slides.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm worried maybe Member Horns minimized the screen because she was able to see it. And I think
Not anymore. If I completely close out and come back in, can you let me in?
yes.
If I go out now? Okay, I'm just gonna go completely out and try it again from the start.
Chair Rodriguez, I've re-entered via my phone, and I'm viewing the screen as I guess as an external member on a separate device, and so I can now see the slide.
Excellent. So we'll give Susan a couple more minutes. I apologize for the delay, but I think it's important.
Apparently, I'm not able to completely go out of it because when I go out of it, my screen's completely black. I still can hear you. So maybe you just can continue with me just hearing descriptions of what's on.
Is there a button that maybe you minimized your screen inadvertently, Susan?
I suppose it's possible.
Yeah.
Is there anything maybe at the bottom of the screen to open up that dock control panel again or view in the full screen mode? It should look like a small square.
Not on the screen that I'm on. I'm still on. When I go into the open the website or the go-to website, all I get is the go-to picture. I don't have this picture that you have. So anyway, but I can hear you perfectly.
Do you have it looks like a little go-to webinar icon at the bottom of your screen. It kind of looks like a snowflake. I just minimize the control panel and that's how you get back into the screen that everyone's viewing. If you click on that, are you able to see anything?
Okay, I'm just joining the webinar. Went back to try to get in again. Okay, look for a little snowflake.
Yeah, at the
At the
bottom,
bottom. Yeah.
like your computer, there's it should have icons for programs you might be using, and it kind of looks like a blue snowflake.
Yeah. Well, I keep getting this message. I close down and open up, and it won't. It goes to the go-to webinar, and then when I try to open it, it says a session is already running. And so then I close that and I just go back to the go-to webinar sign. So just go ahead and I'll participate by listening.
All right. Sorry, Susan. All right. We'll and if you figure it out, or maybe if you have a neighbor that could come look at it, feel free.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Let's go on then. Jessica, are you going to be starting, or is
Yes.
Derek?
Yes, I will be kicking off tonight's presentation on the Chapala Street Vision Zero Safety and Paving Project.
Great. Thank you.
I'm Jessica Grant, Supervising Transportation Planner, and also joining me in this presentation tonight is Derek Bailey, who's our Transportation Engineer. for some of you may have attended the last week's community outreach meeting on this project. So for those that did participate in that, this will be sort of a repeat presentation. But what will be added is what we've heard from the community, not only during that presentation, but through emails and phone calls as well. And for those that didn't attend, then we'll be ready to participate or discuss the presentation tonight, the project, and we will also, if any residents that didn't have a chance to attend the community outreach meeting, this is a good time to participate tonight as well. All right, with that, I wanted to launch into what the staff recommendation is that the committee receive a report and presentation on the Chapala Street Vision Zero Safety and Paving Project and find that the project is consistent with the Bicycle Master Plan, Pedestrian Master Plan, and Vision Zero strategy. So let's start why this project is being proposed. Chapala Street between Sola and Mission Streets is scheduled for pavement maintenance this fall. Prior to any pavement maintenance projects commencing, staff reviews the collision records and traffic operations for opportunities to incorporate cost-effective safety changes into the maintenance efforts. And this process is called the Vision Zero collision analysis. I will describe what Vision Zero means in just a moment, and we will also review any requests or feedback that we receive in our office about particular corridors as well. So that's in addition to doing this Vision Zero analysis, we take feedback over time of what we hear from residents about a particular corridor or intersection, etc. So just background on what Vision Zero is. In 2016, City Council adopted a Vision Zero policy to reduce fatal and severe transportation-related collisions and prioritize transportation safety. The fundamental philosophy of Vision Zero is that transportation-related deaths and severe injuries are unacceptable and preventable. In 2018, City Council adopted the Santa Barbara Vision Zero strategy to implement the city's Vision Zero policy. The Vision Zero strategy helps protect the public, assign shared responsibility, and reimagine a safer future for all street users. The Vision Zero strategy includes 7 core principles, a safety-first mentality, and targeted efforts for priority corridors to eliminate traffic-related deaths or severe injuries. And the core principles are: life is most important, every person matters, people make mistakes, focus on dangerous locations and behaviors, drivers have the critical responsibility, pedestrians and cyclists are the most vulnerable users of our roadway, and the government shares the responsibility for safe streets. There are 23 priority corridors in the city that have the highest number of fatalities and severe injuries. The optimal way to maximize safety in the city is to focus on efforts on addressing patterns of collisions and determine whether there are engineering solutions to address these patterns. Chapala Street is one of the Vision Zero priority corridors. With that, I'll hand it off to the city traffic engineer, Derek Bailey, to review the collision patterns along this corridor and to review the proposed project that addresses those collision patterns. Derek?
Thanks, Ms. Grant. Chair Rodriguez, committee members, good evening. Yeah, just to pick up where Ms. Grant left off. So going back to the paving project plan this fall, knowing that was coming up, we took a deeper dive into the collision history on Chapala Street. We looked at years 2015 through the end of 2019, all pre-COVID. So that's 5 years. During those 5 years between Mitchell-Traina Street and Mission, we didn't look at that one block between Sola Street and Mitchell-Traina Street because there's already plans for a new traffic signal at Sola Street associated with the Sola Street Bicycle Boulevard project. But from Mitchell Traina Street up to Mission, there were 32 total collisions between 2015-19, 19 people injured. The highest individual location was at Arriaga Street. When we just look at all of the intersections along the corridors, Arriaga, Valerio, Islay, and Pedregosa, those four, there were 18 total collisions at those four intersections. And there were also 7 collisions into parked vehicles, interestingly enough. So just looking at all that and then looking for opportunities to reduce these collisions, we also have to ask, is this a pattern? And so we actually went back another 5 years from 2010 to 14, and we saw very similar numbers. You know, and so what that tells us, if we don't do anything now, 5 years from now, we would look and we would expect to see probably about another 30 collisions and another 19 people injured. So that's really what we're trying to do, is break that pattern that seems to be recurring. Next slide, please. And just in the news, this was in Ed Hat. And so, yeah, there is a lot of attention on collisions, especially the ones that happen at Arriaga Street seem to gain the most attention. Next slide, please. And just the most common types of collisions along Chapala Street, broadside collisions. So that's where somebody's pulling out of a side street and gets broadsided by somebody on Chapala Street. Some people call these a T-bone, but we call them technically a broadside type collision. There were 19 of them, so 19 of the 32. 18 of them happened at intersections. So there was one involved somebody pulling out of their driveway, but that just tells us overall along the corridor, this is the most common type of collision and it's happening at intersections. And by far and away, the most injuries are resulting from this type of collision. On the right side of the screen, there's also been some sideswipe type collisions happening. That resulted in 4 collisions total and 2 injuries. Next slide, please. So is that a lot of collisions is another good question. So what we did is we compared this 5-block section of Chapala Street to other 5-block sections of one-way streets in the city. And we didn't so much focus on some of the downtown streets like where Anacapa Street and Santa Barbara Street run through downtown, just because those streets have quite different characteristics. But looking at like De La Vina Street, Bath Street, kind of the upper parts of Anacapa Street and Santa Barbara Street that are one way. When we look at all that, Chapala Street, this section of Chapala Street has the 2nd highest collision rate. So for every 1 million vehicle miles traveled, there's 6.49 collisions. And so that just tells us that compared to other streets in the city, there are a lot of collisions happening here. Even when we start looking at some of the statewide statistics, this section does rank fairly high. Next slide, please. Now, what should be done? So looking at the types of collisions that have been happening in the past, here's what we're proposing to do to address the collision patterns. We're proposing a new traffic signal and intersection lighting at the Arriaga Street intersection to address the pattern of broadside collisions. And as you recall, that was 7 collisions of the 32. So even though it's the highest individual location, it still only represents about 20% of the collisions. So we need to do something else to address the entire corridor, just because the collisions are fairly spread out along the corridor. So north of Arriaga Street, we are proposing to go down to 1 lane, to a lane reduction. That'll address speed. It'll address the broadside collisions at other intersections, not happening as frequently as at Arriaga, but still happening. And it'll also address some of the collisions that are happening into parked vehicles and the side swipes. So those side swipes are typically happening when there's 2 vehicles driving side by side. You know, that'll definitely go away if the street is 1 lane instead of 2. Next slide, please. So can 1 lane work? We are working on a number of other 1 lane projects in the city. We implemented Anacapa Street in 2020. So we have to do a similar analysis here on Chapala Street. The reason we think this can work is because of the traffic volumes. Down near Sola Street, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, down near Sola Street, that block between Sola and Mitchell-Traina, the daily traffic volume is about 8,100. But there's a pretty heavy left turn movement when people are driving up Chapala Street and they turn left to go towards the Mitchell-Traina Street overcrossing and onto the west side. So that next block between Mitchell-Traina and Arriaga, the traffic volume drops from 8,100 down to 7,400. And again, there's another heavy left turn movement with people going towards the northbound Highway 101 on-ramp. And so north of Arriaga Street, the traffic volume is about 5,600 per day. So you can see that it drops from 8,100 per day down to about 5,600 per day over those two blocks, just because there's so many people turning left to go either towards the west side or the Highway 101 on-ramp. So once we're into that 5,600 range, that's actually makes this project very feasible. Just to compare to Anacapa Street that was implemented last year, that daily traffic volume is about 5,900. So that's actually a little bit busier than what we're looking at right here. Next slide, please. So this just shows the lane configuration, existing versus proposed. So on the left-hand side of that image, that just shows 2 lanes going all the way up Chapala Street from Mitchell-Traina towards Mission. That's existing. On the right-hand side, that shows the new lane configuration. So at the Arriaga Street intersection, there will be some dedicated turn lanes and then 1 lane going north from there. So at the Valerio Street intersection, is it possible just to hover over that just so we can? So on the right-hand side, the Valerio and Chapala, yeah, right there. And then the next intersection up at Islay, 1 lane, and the next intersection up at Pedregosa, 1 lane. And then that block between Pedregosa and Mission, it will open up from 1 lane to 2. And we think that's important because just based on pre-COVID traffic volumes, we think there's going to be 2 lanes needed at the Mission Street intersection. Otherwise, there's going to be some pretty significant queuing that can form at certain times of the day. But we did get some comments on that from the public, and I am going to come back to that. So next slide, please. So if we go down to 1 lane from 2, what will it look like? And there's 2 examples in the city of what that can look like. On the left-hand side, that's bike lane configuration. That's 1 block over on Bath Street from Chapala, 1 block over. And on the right-hand side, that's Anacapa Street. And that was the project that was implemented last year. And with Anacapa Street, the traffic lane goes straight down the middle, and there's these buffers or shoulders on either side. Next slide, please. Okay, so so when we're looking at what is the proper configuration, do we do the bike lane configuration, or do we do the configuration with the buffers on either side? Last year when the Anacapa Street project was implemented, and that's shown on this map in red, Anacapa Street doesn't connect to any other bicycle facilities in the city. So for us, that made a lot of sense to do that configuration instead of the bike lane configuration. But we did hear from the cycling community that they wished we would have just done bike lanes, even though it didn't connect anything. Chapala Street in blue is a little bit different because as you go north on Chapala Street and get to Mission Street, that's where the existing bike lane begins. So for this particular project, going down to 1 lane, it makes sense to configure Chapala Street with a bike lane, just because that's going to extend that existing facility. And we think cyclists are going to want to use that. Go to the next slide, please. One of the reasons we think they're going to want to use it is just because there's a demand to get to Upper De La Vina Street, like where Trader Joe's is up there from downtown. And right now, there's not really a direct cycling route to get up there. One can go kind of up State Street and then zigzag over towards Chapala Street north of Mission, and then just keep wiggling your way over to get up to Upper De La Vina Street. The one kind of drawback about the State Street bike lanes, kind of when you get a little bit north of Mitchell-Traina Street, there gets to be some steeper hills. And also the bike lanes, they're the bare minimum width. They're only 5 feet wide, and they're next to a rather narrow parking lane. And once we get north of Mission Street, where the median begins, it gets even narrower. So the comfort level of those bike lanes on State Street north of downtown, not the greatest. On Chapala Street, it's flatter, and the bike lanes could be implemented like Bath Street with a buffer. So we think as far as cyclists wanting to get up towards Upper De La Vina Street, this could be a really attractive option for them and much more comfortable. Next slide, please. Okay, so going back to the slide that we just saw a few slides ago, on the left shows Bath Street with the buffered bike lane. That's what we're proposing for Chapala Street as opposed to what's on the right-hand side on Anacapa Street. Next slide, please. So this kind of gets into some of the technical details, but it relates to parking removal, which everybody's been very concerned about. So we talked about that block between Pedregosa and Mission Street needing to open up from 1 lane back to 2 lanes right at the intersection just for capacity reasons. So that little red dot there kind of in between Pedregosa and Mission Street shows roughly where that transition has to happen. Next slide, please. So what does the transition look like? And this is the Anacapa Street example. So you can see on the bottom of the photo where it's 1 lane, where the buffers end. And then beyond that, you can see where the 2 lanes begin up towards the intersection. If you can imagine if there were a cyclist, and this was an actual bike lane on the right-hand side, if there was a cyclist cycling up that buffer, and then they get to the end of the buffer, at the same time that there's a vehicle coming along and that vehicle decides to veer right to take that right lane, that's what we call a conflict point, where there's potentially 2 vehicles or a vehicle and a cyclist that are trying to be in the same place at the same time. Obviously, the cyclist is going to lose. So this particular transition example, we don't think would be a safe alternative on Chapala Street. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a bit more of an engineering drawing, but on the left-hand side of the screen, that shows south of the intersection. So if you can kind of hover over the bike lane at the bottom, everybody see that right there? So that area down there is kind of where we have to start opening up to 2 traffic lanes. But in order to make it as safe as possible for cyclists, that bike lane should just continue straight up and go right up to the intersection. And that additional lane for traffic will open up on the left-hand side of the road, or the west side of the road. And because that bike lane needs to go straight up to the intersection, and that's the safest configuration, you know, that means that in order to open up to 2 lanes for traffic, we're going to have to remove some parking south of the intersection. So that would require about 6 parking space removals south of the intersection along the west side. Those are unrestricted parking spaces, meaning they don't have a time limit. We have identified 1 space that we can reintroduce along the east side of the road. When we do the paving project this fall, we can change the shape of one of the driveways. So the net loss on this block would be 5 spaces. On the right-hand side of the screen, that just shows north of the intersection where it would transition from 2 lanes back to 1 lane. And north of the intersection, there would be 2 parking spaces removed along the west side of the road. So obviously there was a lot of concern about this in the public comment. Next slide, please. So what are the trade-offs with this project? You know, obviously we're trying to maximize safety, but you know, there are trade-offs with this project. The loss of parking near Mission Street is a big concern. There will be a slight increase in side street delay. Traffic is concentrated from 2 lanes into 1 lane, so there's going to be fewer gaps in traffic. But generally, the increase in delay at the stop sign controlled intersections is going to be quite small. At Arriaga Street, interestingly, where there's going to be a traffic signal, that's where there's going to be the biggest increase in side street delay, just because drivers on the side street, when they get to an intersection and the light is red, they have to wait for the green light. Stop signs, somebody pulls up, there's a gap in traffic, they go. So generally stop signs are a little bit more efficient. As far as the corridor travel time, so if you're driving along Chapala Street from Mitchell-Traina Street up to north of Mission Street, there's probably going to be about a 10-second average increase in travel time. So fairly small increase overall. Obviously, it depends on the time of day and how many vehicles are around you at any particular time, but average is going to be about 10 seconds. Next slide, please. So other benefits. One of the things that we're concerned about in the city with any multi-lane street is something called a multiple threat for pedestrians. So if there's a pedestrian at a crosswalk and a driver in the first lane yields to them and pedestrian starts crossing the street, driver in the second lane may not realize that what the first vehicle is doing and just pass them. And that's what we call a multiple threat. There isn't any history of this happening on Chapala Street, which is good because typically when this type of collision happens, it turns out really badly. But this type of roadway configuration with one lane would prevent this from ever happening. Next slide, please. Project costs. The traffic signal is going to be about $100,000. We figured out a new delivery method for this traffic signal. It's going to be a combination of using contractor forces with the paving project, as well as utilizing some of our city crews to do some of the work. So it's going to be quite a bit more cost effective than the traffic signal down the street at De La Vina and Arriaga, for example. That was around $200,000. Striping, there's going to be about $5,000 additional striping above and beyond what would have had to go back in with the paving project, and probably about $1,000 for signs. Next slide, please. Okay, so just since the meeting that we had for the public last Wednesday, here's some of the things that we've heard. There's really good support for the traffic signal at Arriaga Street, unanimous support. I haven't heard anything negative about that. Fairly strong support for the lane reduction. There's support for speed control. Some people want us to do even more. We've also heard do not remove parking near Mission Street. Businesses rely on it. It is a heavily parked area, so lots of concern about parking removal. And we also heard some concerns about the approach to Mission Street, where we talked about it opening from one lane up to 2 lanes. And actually, we heard some really good comments with different perspectives. Some people concerned about congestion and wanting us to maintain 2 lanes at Mission Street. And others that thought that, maybe we should try a 1-lane configuration initially. And so how we're going to approach this is this fall, when school begins and traffic volumes, we hope, kind of get back to normal in a post-COVID world, we're going to restudy that intersection and just see, do a capacity analysis and just see what the opportunities are to either go down to 1 lane or perhaps just with a short turn lane. That would lessen the impact on parking removal. And we also heard that merge north of Mission Street, some people are uncomfortable with that. So that would also eliminate that condition. Just based on what we know right now, if traffic volumes kind of revert to what they were pre-COVID, I'm pretty sure we're going to need 2 lanes, but it's absolutely a good idea to restudy that this fall after school gets back in session. Next slide. And we can just go back one. And again, here's that area near Mission Street where we're currently proposing it opening up from 1 lane to 2, that it is a good idea just to restudy that this fall. Next slide.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Bailey. As far as for plan consistency, it is outlined in detail in the staff report. But some of the things for your committee to evaluate is this project consistent with the Vision Zero strategy, pedestrian master plan, and bicycle master plan? With respect to the Vision Zero strategy, the project would reduce the collision patterns. It would improve comfort and safety at intersections, and it also increases cyclist safety, closes our network gaps, and is context sensitive. As far as for next steps, hope to go to City Council in the summer of 2021, and construction is anticipated in late 2021 and early 2022. With that, I'd like to close with the recommendation for the committee is to hope that you make the findings tonight to find that the project is consistent with the bicycle master plan, pedestrian master plan, and Vision Zero strategy. Mr. Bailey and I are here if you have any questions at this time.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much. That was really wonderful. I had the opportunity to attend the other presentation, and I'm glad I did both because it's quite a lot of information. So at this time, committee members are reminded that these are clarifying questions, and comments and discussion of the project will come after public comment. So clarifying questions would be very appreciated. Anyone? Susan's hand is raised. Susan, recognize Chair Member Horn.
If this is not clarifying, I can hold on to it, but I was just thinking about removing the cars and from that very congested commercial area there at Mission at the intersection, and just wondering if there is a parking lot near there that could be used for extra parking in that area, because it is, those businesses really do depend on the cars for their customers. Have you thought of that, or?
Yeah, Committee Member Horn, the city does not control any of the parking lots up in that area. They're all privately held. We are looking for other opportunities to kind of make more efficient use of curb space up there. Like I said, we've identified one space. There's 3 or 4 more that we're not sure are going to work out or not, just to mitigate some of the impact. Based on our observation, the way that parking is being utilized in that area, generally a lot of the customer-oriented parking is more along Mission Street, and there's one side of the road on the east side of Chapala, north of the intersection, where the 90-minute parking is. That creates the turnover for customer parking. What seems to be happening with that parking that is being proposed for removal is it's used by employees during the day and residents overnight. And so we think that would be who is most impacted.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Chair Rodriguez, this is Committee Member Collum. My apologies if I might have missed something that sort of makes this clarification question a little bit moot, but so it seems to me that the impetus for this project is to basically reduce the collision pattern that introduces, or the traffic pattern that introduces T-bones or broadsides, as you say. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but this seems like kind of an issue of both visibility and time in order to fit into traffic. It's, as you stated, the gap or the time between gaps will actually reduce. And I understand that, centering cars in the traffic lane will kind of increase visibility, but I'm just curious because it doesn't seem like a very clear way to reduce this traffic pattern that introduces collisions. And I was hoping that you could detail a little bit more how this will actually reduce that pattern.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the traffic signal mitigation at Arriaga Street should be fairly self-explanatory as far as mitigating the broadside collisions. But yeah, the other three intersections, that's a really good question. There is a decent amount of red curb at each of those three intersections. Normally when we start getting more broadside collisions than preferred, that's the first step, is just can you increase visibility next to the intersection so that people pulling up on the side street can see reasonably. But there is a decent amount of red curb at all three of those intersections. So for some other reason, drivers are misjudging gaps in the traffic. And it could be, and this is my theory, is that because it's a two-lane street, it's a little bit more difficult to recognize what's happening, and if we can go down to a one-lane street, it makes the decision-making for the drivers a little bit easier, just because there's only one lane that they have to look at, one lane approaching that they need to analyze as far as that conflict point. As we talked about with the capacity analysis and the traffic being concentrated into one lane, on this particular street, just with the traffic volumes being what they are, there's still going to be some pretty significant gaps in traffic. So as far as the impacts to delay and the available gaps in traffic and judging those gaps, we don't think it's going to be a very significant change from what drivers are currently experiencing. It's just trying to simplify the intersection is a good way of putting it with one approach lane.
Okay, I appreciate that. That does make sense. If I could ask a follow-up, I'm curious though, with the introduction of a bike lane, I mean, it seems to me that sort of reintroduces the problem that we're trying to work around here, which is having basically lower visibility due to having two lanes that are kind of crammed together, and then also having multiple lanes to look at and recognize. So I guess the ultimate question is, and I understand that sample sizes are pretty small, but has there been an increase in bicycle car collisions on other streets, such as, for example, back, where this has been done before?
Yeah, another great questions there. So just to start off with your last question there, Bath Street and Castillo Street, no, there's very few bike-related or bike-involved collisions on those streets. And we did kind of go back and forth with this one, because visibility-wise, the Anacapa Street configuration is superior, because you're putting the vehicles dead center in the middle of the road. So it's easiest to see them there, and it's easiest for drivers to see what is going on at the intersection that they're approaching. Currently, if you can think about, if you're driving up Chapala Street and you're on that left lane, the driver's position, you're only a few feet away from parked vehicles. So being so close to that line of parked vehicles, it's hard to see around that last vehicle as you're approaching the intersection. So if we're moving vehicles out into the center of the roadway, that sight line gets a lot better. The reason we think that the bike lane alternative is superior in this location, just because the connectivity issue going up to bike lane north of Mission Street is based on what we're seeing on Anacapa Street. Cyclists are using it anyway, and we think that's going to happen on Chapala Street. So we think it's important, if we're going to make something that cyclists are going to use, make it as safe as possible. We are planning to make the buffers a little bit smaller on this street, just so vehicles can be positioned a little bit closer to the street with superior sight lines. And then I think your first question was about, if we're introducing cyclists to the street in combination with going down to one lane, is that adding another element that makes the intersection more complex? And I think for me, the answer to that is cyclists are moving a lot slower. So, it's two traffic lanes approaching an intersection versus one traffic lane and a fairly slow moving bike lane. I think just it's a much simpler intersection. It's going to be a lot easier for both the driver on Chapala Street and the side street drivers to analyze, make decisions, and proceed.
Great. Well, thank you very much for considering that.
Does anyone else have any specific questions at this point? We will definitely have time to comment. Andres?
Yeah, one question and clarification is the approach to the Mission intersection and exactly what's going on in the lanes there. What I read from the diagram was that basically that red line in bold on the far left is in addition to the red striping, with the lanes justified off to the left, and then the bike lane or the parking remaining on the right side, and then the bike path adjacent to the remaining or existing parking. Is that correct?
Let me repeat that just to make sure I understood. And first off, in our AutoCAD drawing, we drew our curb lines in red, and we also drew the red curb in red. And I apologize, that's probably not as clear as it should have been. So starting on the right-hand side, the east side of the road, parking remains. So no changes to parking along the east side of the road. Right next to that would be the bike lane that would go all the way up to Mission Street. And then next to that would be the 2 traffic lanes. And yeah, along that east or west side of the road, that's where the parking removal would be so that that second lane can open up. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and then maybe one more towards the crosswalk when the actual stop or the light is there, like because you'd have the number 2 car lane there and then the bike lane, and that'd be a straight or right turn for the car.
Yes, that's correct. So legally, drivers in this condition where there's no dedicated right turn lane, drivers as they're approaching the intersection next to a bike lane, and there is that skip line that forms, the bike lane line goes from a solid white to a skip white. That's a cue for drivers that they should begin merging into the bike lane to make their right-hand turn. And the reason that's important is so that the right hook type collision does not happen, where the driver stays in their lane all the way up to the intersection and then they make a sudden right turn in front of the cyclists. This is so as drivers kind of pull into that bike lane, bikes and drivers will be going single file, and that risk of the right hook goes away.
Got it. And then lastly, for striping or signaling, is there intention to put the kind of the green shared space between that line or that lane and bike lane?
Yes, so great. That's a really great question. There's a separate project happening later this summer ahead of this one, north of Mission Street. So that's going to be adding the green conflict striping to this to the Chapala Street bike lane north of Mission. That was already in the works before we started looking at this. So it seems that adding the green conflict striping to this section, if it moves forward, makes a lot of sense. Just to create that continuity and consistency with this bike lane all the way up Chapala Street.
Great, thank you.
Would anyone else like to ask anything? Well, if not, I believe we can move into public comment. Is that appropriate now? Jessica?
Yeah, I'm not seeing anyone's hands raised. If we can put the public comment slide on the screen. Just as a reminder, if you do want to indicate that you'd like to make a public comment, please click the raise/lower your hand icon in the control panel, and I'll notify you when it's your turn to speak. You'll have 2 minutes to speak, and no time may be donated from another speaker. And it's recommended that the speakers keep a personal timer handy. So it does look like we have 1 hand raised. We could go ahead and get the timer on the screen, and then I'll go ahead and unmute you. Craig, it looks like, let me try and unmute you here. Okay.
Hi. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to keep this quick because I appreciate that it's late. So I'd like to thank both the committee and the staff for, working after regular business hours. Just wanted to chime in that my daughter and I actually use that one block of Chapala Street between Pedrosa and Mission 2 to 3 times a week to take her to speech therapy there in that like office park on the northeast side of the street there. And in fact, we were there this morning riding our bike. So I guess I'd like to say that I empathize with the neighborhood losing 7 spaces, but I think it's important for the city to ensure that bike lane goes that extra block, because otherwise there's not a great way, at least from the west side, without going all the way to State Street to get to that little office park there, because Mission is a little bit sketchy riding bicycle. So I hope you take that into consideration, and thank you for the opportunity to provide a public comment.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, Craig, I'm going to go ahead and lower your hand and mute you if you're done. Okay, and I don't believe we have any other public comment at this time.
Okay, then we could move on to committee comments before or after a recommendation is suggested. It can be, if someone would like to make the recommendation and then make some comments or discussion, that's fine. Or if you'd like to make some comments now and then we'll make a recommendation, that's fine too. Hillary? Ms. Blackerby, excuse me.
You can call me. So yeah, I'll comments, but then I will move the recommendation. This is really exciting. I had the chance to attend the public workshop or meeting presentation. I love them. I feel like I've been to several where it's the Jessica and Derek show, and you do such a good job describing the project. So I really appreciate that. And again, tonight, very clear. Chapala has been the Wild West for a long time, and it's pretty sketchy on a bike, and it's kind of sketchy in a car. So it's exciting to see that even if it's not a super long stretch, it will be a bit safer, I would say, for all modes. That light at Arriaga is going to be a game changer for everyone. And a lot of buses turn there to go to the freeway. And there's always sort of conflicts there with cars trying to scoot out on Arriaga to shoot the gap in between, and gaps in traffic. And so I think the light is really going to make a huge difference safety-wise. It's always dramatic to lose parking. I appreciate looking, the folks will be looking nearby, staff's looking nearby for where they might be able to add. I use this, I visit this intersection every few weeks. My chiropractor is actually there. And I've noticed that kind of no matter what time of day I'm there, the 90-minute parking just through the intersection, I can think of maybe a couple times where there hasn't been a spot. So I agree with my anecdotal assessment of, what Mr. Bailey said about those spots seem to turn over if you're visiting businesses. But of course, the ones that are unrestricted are probably sort of car storage. And I think, depending on how you feel about it, I think that, the roadways should be for people moving through the area, not necessarily for storing vehicles. So for, long periods of time. So I think it's a great project. Excited to see it. And if you could just, if staff could just repeat what the timeline for the different components of this are, I'd appreciate that. Thanks. Okay, I see the next steps.
Chair
So
Rodriguez, Committee Member Blackerby, yep, this is for the next steps for these pavement maintenance projects where we see the opportunities for safety improvements. It has been a protocol that we go to the Transportation Circulation Committee and then followed by Council. So we hope to be at City Council later this summer, and then construction is anticipated in late 2021 and early 2022.
So the whole thing would happen, as part of one process, right? So the light goes in and the paving and striping happens all at the same time.
Yes, and then we will, of course, we'll be communicating to the residents as well when we have more specifics on the construction start and end times as well.
Okay.
Is there anything else, Mr. Bailey, that you would like to add?
Yeah, if I could, and just to share with the commission and public that might be listening, when we pave streets, generally we also reconstruct corner access ramps to provide ADA accessibility. And that will happen on Chapala Street. There's missing access ramps on Chapala Street, so those will be added. That's usually the first order of business, is to do the concrete work, and then we pave afterwards. But because that contractor is going to be mobilized on Chapala Street doing access ramps, that's the reason we think that we can deliver this traffic signal so efficiently, because there's already going to be that contractor mobilized. They can put in the concrete pole foundations, the underground conduit, the pole boxes and everything like that. So that'll be the first order of business, is just kind of that ground level infrastructure. And then the paving and the installation of the lights will happen after that.
Great, thank you. So with that, Madam Chair, I would move that we find the project consistent with the bicycle master plan, the pedestrian master plan, and the Vision Zero strategy.
You're muted, Kathleen.
Thank you, Susan. I'm sorry. Would anyone like to second that recommendation?
I'll second.
I'll second that.
Recognize I saw Ms. Horn first, so her hand went up, so that's fine. We have a second. Before we take the vote, I do have a couple of comments. Does anyone else have any comments before I go? I would just like to point out how refreshing it is to see the Vision Zero perspective as the first order of business. Those of us, Ms. Horn and Ms. Blackerby, who've been on the committee for a while, have really experienced the change to Vision Zero, from just basically trying to make sure that people are, quote, reasonably safe. And I'd also like to point out that I don't think Mr. Collum or Mr. Malavos were involved in the committee at the time, but we had some very vocal concern that accident reporting wasn't adequate, because it was just through the police and without the health, without the hospital. And I just wanted to add that I've spoken recently with Sam Furtner, who's working on this project, and I want this in the committee. I want this publicly stated that they have been working diligently with Cottage Hospital and County Health to ensure that if an accident wasn't reported, or a bicyclist was hit or fell and never reported it to the police, it just goes into the hospital records and it never gets documented. So what's happening is that the hospital, because of confidentiality, isn't really able to reveal, but the county health department can. And in the cities of San Francisco and in the city of New York, the public health department shares their documentation with the traffic departments in those cities. And it's been delayed. It still isn't quite implemented here. And it was simply delayed because the county health department has been so enmeshed with COVID-19. But within the next year, although I think the reporting that we saw is incredibly useful, I'm going to feel a lot better when we're certain that every accident is accounted for, whether or not there was a police documentation. We need to be sure that the emergency room visits are covered, and that will help. And that can be done confidentially through the health department records. And then I had one more comment, and I wanted to ask about this. I was delighted when I went down Anacapa Street for the first time. It feels relaxed to drive down Anacapa, where it's so has buffer zones. But I did experience a bicyclist in the buffer zone, and I wondered, there are people that are going to want to go into the blocks individually on their bikes, even if they don't take it all the way down the corridor. And I would like to ask about how that how that situation could be dealt with. I don't know. I mean, because it's all buffer. It doesn't say anything about bikes.
Chair Rodriguez, this is Derek Bailey again.
Thank you.
Another great question. Thank you for that. So technically, those buffers are legally considered shoulders. So bikes can be there. There's no legal issue with that. But I think more functionally, to your point, is if it doesn't quite look like a bike lane, are drivers and cyclists going to treat it like a bike lane? And to the point of the cycling community that contacted us after the Anacapa Street project was implemented and just wished we would have put in bike lanes, we're definitely going to revisit that the next time Anacapa Street is resurfaced. And taking that experience a couple blocks over to Chapala Street, and especially considering there is that bike lane that connects north of Mission Street, I think for us that just really reinforced why this is the right configuration on Chapala Street as opposed to the buffers on either side.
Thank you. And one other minor, well, it might not be minor point. We have always contemplated that State would be the major bike artery, and we all know that that's suddenly up in the air with the downtown situation. So I think as a committee, we need to keep that in mind, that Anacapa could become even more important as a bike artery, even though that wasn't initially in anybody's mind. I just wanted to make that point. So does anyone else have any comments before we have a roll call vote? Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and I guess we can have the vote now, Mindy.
Okay. Committee member Blackerby,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
Cullum,
Aye.
Alevos,
Aye.
and Chair Rodriguez.
Yes, aye, unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. I think we can move on to program updates. And once again, thanks, Derek and Jessica, for your terrific presentation and great organization. It moves things along quite nicely. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Chair Rodriguez. So I have two program updates for this evening. The first is the city's bike share program, followed by the state budget surplus and active transportation program update. For the bike share program, I wanted to share a couple statistics with you. As you know, the City Council approved a 3-year pilot bike share program. And we launched the program in January of this year. And so far, as of May 31st, there has been approximately 13,914 total trips and over 63,000 miles ridden. For the pilot program, we hope to have 250 pedal assist electric bikes with 500 docks. Currently, we have 96 pedal assist electric bikes in operation and 192 docks. And we also, on June 11th, the California Coastal Commission approved the expansion of the pilot program in the coastal zone. So as of June 18th, we started to install some of the dock locations in the coastal zone, and that will be continuing over the next several weeks and month for that. So I think it's great for this pilot program to for us to continue to expand the network, and that will help us assess again. The point of bike share is a point-to-point service. So for people that might be interested in using bike share where their destination might be too far to walk, but maybe it's too close to drive, then bike share provides that opportunity to provide that gap. So that is the most current statistics. We'll continue to have updates about this program and over time. And like I said, I think with the allowance now in the coastal zone, we'll be able to get a better picture of how it's all being utilized.
Very good.
And
thank you very much.
Yes, and there was a couple more statistics. Let's see. I think there was about 8,700 passes sold so far, and there's been about 916 monthly and annual pass memberships sold right now. So we're continuing to monitor.
That sounds pretty good from our, but is this, you've given us the numbers, but is this rapid or slow relative to other cities, or how do we compare?
It's hard. I think what we'll do is have a more detailed project update in maybe at the end of the summer with a little bit more statistics. It's not a complete apples to apples with other cities, but I think our closest sister city that installed a similar bike share program with dock system is in Santa Cruz. So certainly we'll be able to report the statistics to see how we are doing. I think we didn't really have any set metrics per se. It's more of the operations that it's being used as a point-to-point service. It's something that as the city, we didn't want to compete with bike rental companies. And again, that it's more utilitarian in nature.
Thank you.
Chair, I don't know. I'm wondering, are we allowed to make a comment during an update?
I think it's reasonable. Our meeting is not overly long. Please feel free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I signed up as a annual membership like when it launched, because I'm like, great, I'm gonna do it. But the pandemic was ongoing, and I am like just now in the past month or two creeping out into public. But I finally last week took my first ride and have done it several times this week. They're great. It's great. I mean, being in the coastal zone will be great because I live in the coastal zone, but even just getting around downtown, the locations, I think are pretty good so far. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more. The docks are like very elegant. It looks better than any bike share system I've seen in any other city. The bikes feel stable. Obviously, they're new, which is great, and not super beat up like you find in other places. But they're well maintained. The basket is great. Yeah, it just works really well. I have the little RFID tag, which I think makes it a lot easier, not have to deal with an app and everything. But I just want to congratulate the city. I also think, while I think it was unfortunate that it was appealed in the coastal zone and that delayed that piece a lot, I think it sort of forced the city and B-Cycle to think about what are other places that aren't just downtown and the waterfront to put them, where that might not have happened right off the bat. And I think that's made it a much more useful system for locals getting in from the neighborhoods and from Milpas and from upper state than if they were just around downtown. So I'm not glad it happened, but I think the silver lining is that they've been more widely distributed throughout the city. I hope that continues to happen. And yeah, I just want to congratulate staff and B-Cycle on, I think, doing a really kind of elegant launch of something that is rarely elegantly launched. So, congratulations.
Thank you, committee member Blackerby, for your comments. Appreciated. With that, should I go to the next update?
I think so.
Okay. So then the next one, I reported on it last time in April, and it was about the state budget surplus. So there was a state budget surplus of approximately $2 billion. And there was talks about having some of that surplus funding go back into the active transportation program, specifically Cycle 5. Although there was monies awarded, as you know from our past meetings, how competitive the active transportation program was or is. And we were, as part of the last cycle, very fortunate to get one project funded, which was the Upper De La Vina Street Gap Closure and Safe Crossings project. And we'll be working with the California Transportation Commission and Caltrans and SPCAG getting that funding appropriated this summer. But there is the potential for some additional funds from the state surplus to feed back into the active transportation program. What we're hearing about as the current dollar number is $500 million. And with that we have two additional projects that we applied for: the Cliff Drive Urban Highway to Complete Street Transformation Project and the West Side and Lower West Neighborhood Active Transportation Plan, positioned very well. We were just 1 to 2 points off the mark from receiving those grants on this cycle. So if there was additional funding, we are positioned well for that. So right now, the state budget is set for approval on July 15th. And if that is in the budget, then the next step would be that there would be a follow-up action by the California Transportation Commission to then program those funds back to the active transportation program. So we are all monitoring that extremely close because these projects that we have would be extremely transformational projects for the city. So we're still continuing to have fingers crossed. There is still a potential to have even additional funding that we hear. There might be additional augmentation funds on top of the 500 million. But again, we won't probably know that until September or October of this year. The other project that did not meet the cutoff was the improvements on Milpas Street. So that scored lower than the West Side and Cliff Drive applications, but it did have a fairly decent score. So we'll see what happens to that. So with that, we're, like I said, continuing to monitor the state budget. Any
Wow,
questions?
thank you. Thank you. That's stunning. If Cliff Drive comes through, I would be thrilled. I've only been waiting for it 50 years. Susan lived up there for a very long time. If we have a meeting in August, hopefully you would have an update for us at that time.
Yes.
And if possible, if we end up even not having a meeting, perhaps you could just let us know by email if those are granted. That would be nice to get information to the committee. I think we'd all appreciate that. These are huge.
Right, will do.
Okay, are there any other? Oh, I'm sorry.
If I could just clarify, so you mentioned the state budget surplus was 2 billion. It's actually 75 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. And also the state budget did pass by June 15th, but they still have trailer bill language to work out. And so it's sort of, the budget in chief was passed, but trailer bill language, a bunch of basically details about how they're doing is being negotiated, but hopefully sometime in the next few weeks, we'll find out what that looks like.
Yes, thank you, committee member Blackerby. Yeah, it's I think the city budget's complicated enough, but when you go to the state level, as you said, there's different processes and kind of the initial budget, the follow-up, I guess, budget or trailers as you described it. So this would be something that we're paying attention to. July 15th would be this particular critical piece of information.
Yeah, just as a former legislative staffer, just had to, it's so shocking that it's a $75 billion surplus. Sounds weird coming out of anyone's mouth. So
Wow.
Yeah, especially out of the pandemic. I know when I heard the word surplus, I'm like, how is that possible?
Yeah, that's way outside the purview of our committee, but are there any other announcements or comments before we adjourn? Susan Horn, Ms. Horn?
Just a comment that I sat in on the county talking about the ARPA funding that they're getting from the federal level, American Rescue Plan Act, I think. And I'm just wondering if that will have an effect on transportation funding. Don't know if you have any idea. That was a county thing, and they're getting a huge amount every county is getting a huge amount.
Thank you, committee member Horn, for that question. I don't have a response at this time. Yeah, there is some follow-up at the federal level of potential infrastructure monies and other pots of money. So we're continuing to monitor, but nothing on our end of certain yet for an update for this evening.
Pretty weird time with suddenly all this funding.
It's very strange.
Yes,
well,
but we're appreciative, as you know, for the capital planning that you participate in, is how less money we have for just maintaining our existing infrastructure, and there really isn't a lot of opportunities for new projects, even when they're safety projects. And so these types of monies for the active transportation plan has really been a game changer for our community, and it's very appreciative. So we're always on the lookout for potential funding.
Yep. Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate everybody being able to show up, and we missed Eve. And Looks like we might have a meeting in August. We don't know yet, right? Too early to tell. It's on the schedule.
Yes, on
It's
the
on the
schedule, and yep, we'll have a probably an update in about a month just to confirm that meeting. But so far,
Yeah.
we might have one.
Mindy will let us know. So I believe we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.